First of all, we'll just do like an introduction. I give some information. Okay, this is an oral interview with Marvin Barker. We're going to be speaking about World War II. Today's date is March 30th, 1991, and we're in Ogden, Utah right now at Marvin's house.
Yeah, in a home that's over 125 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this one of the family homes too?
No,
Okay.
no, it was bought.
Marvin's mother's house is just about a block south of here. How old is that house?
Oh, I imagine that's 80 years old probably.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, could you tell me some of your personal background? For example, where were you born, when, and a little bit about your early family information.
Well, I was born in the house down on the corner. I was the middle of 9 children. And after me, the children were born in the hospital, but those that were born before me was also born at the home. And I just grew up in this community just as a normal kid, working on the farm, going to the public schools here, and getting involved in the sports in the community and in the church.
What year were you born?
1917, September the 3rd.
Okay. Now,
So I'm getting up there in the years.
let's see, who's older, you or Phyllis?
Phyllis,
Phyllis is older, okay.
a couple years older.
Okay.
Just about 2. She was born in December and I was born in September.
Now, you went on a mission in 1940. At the time that you went on your mission, the war in Europe had already broken out.
Oh yeah, it was in progress.
Did you ever think that it might? I mean, what were your feelings? What were your fears
Well,
at the time?
My mission call was to Australia, but because war looked imminent at that time, they pulled the missionaries out of Australia. They didn't send any more down, so they changed my mission from Australia to Hawaii. And a lot of missionaries down in those South Pacific Islands were also brought out, and we had some of them in our mission there in Hawaii.
And your mission was to the Japanese people in Hawaii.
They had 2 missions. The one was what they call the Hawaiian mission, and the other one was the Japanese mission, where we worked mainly with just the Japanese people.
Were you Japanese speaking?
No, we didn't have to speak their language.
And you were there during Pearl Harbor.
I was there in the islands. I was on the island of Maui when Pearl Harbor was attacked. But they did get 1 or 2 those miniature submarines come in to Maui on the Wailuku side over there, I think. But they took a lot of precautions. They had blackouts and everything. And they issued us all gas masks.
And you say you saw the smoke from Pearl Harbor?
Oh, we could see the smoke from the attack, yeah.
Well, how was it to be a missionary to the Japanese people when Japanese just had, the Japanese government just enacted aggression?
When it happened, the work really slowed down. In fact, quite often we'd go out in the evenings on patrol with what you'd call a security guard there. We'd go around with the Japanese people there in the islands. The younger ones were all Americans, and they were loyal to America. But we really didn't worry about any sabotage. I wasn't concerned about it.
Yeah. Okay. And what year did you return from your mission?
1942.
Okay. And by that time, the war was in full swing in Europe and in Asia. When you got back from your mission, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I I had to sign up while I was over in Hawaii for the draft. But when I came back, I didn't want to be drafted because when you're drafted, they could put you any place. And I didn't want to be a foot soldier.
Yeah.
And so I enlisted in the Air Force so I wouldn't get drafted and put in the infantry or some other artillery or something. I didn't even think maybe that I'd ever get into combat, but I did.
Mm-hmm. Well, how old were you when you went into the Army Air Force?
And I'd have been 24. I didn't go on the mission until I was 22. I was 24 when I went on the mission.
How much time was there between the time you got home off your mission and the time you went into the military?
I would say maybe 2 months.
Not much time at all.
No, it wasn't much time at all.
Why did you choose the Army Air Forces?
Well, I thought a little safer. And the first thing, I thought I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And my mission president asked me what I was going to do, and I told him, and he says, they don't live very long. That was the early days of the war,
Yeah.
But I enlisted in the Air Force, and I took pilot training, and I had 32 hours of a solo flight, but I decided, I wasn't going to risk my neck. I could get in something more safe, and I knew my folks needed help on the place here. And then too, my brother James that got killed in the service, he went into the service while I was on my mission. And I hadn't seen him for so many years. And he was stationed over at Fort Carson, Colorado. And when I was in flight training, I thought, I'll get out of this and get in something a little safer. So I applied for armament school. That was at Denver, Colorado, at Lowry Field. And James was over at Camp Carson. So
It's in Colorado Springs, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
So I told my flight instructor and the check pilot I was going to drop out. Well, he says, you got to make up your mind. And I got transferred to Lowry Field. I put in for armament school there. And while I was there, then I got together with my brother. And of course, I was the last one in the family that saw him alive.
And that was there at Fort Carson? You went down
no, he came into Denver.
Oh, okay. So at Lowry Field.
Yeah, we spent a little time there at Denver.
He was quite young, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, he was born 1922. He would have been 5 years younger than me. 5 or 6, right through there.
And he was killed 2 years later?
Well, he was killed in February of 1945. He was killed while I was still in the service.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of your questions was about why did I get on the bomber crew?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a story.
Yeah, in fact, what it is, we can tie this together. Tell me about your training experiences and how you did end up on a bomber.
Well, how I ended up on the bomber crew is to be a gunner on a bomber crew was a volunteer program, but they weren't getting enough people to volunteer. So what they did when I was in armament school, they didn't ask for volunteers. They took everybody that graduated from armament school and sent them out to gunnery school to be a gunner on a bomber. That's how I got on the bomber crew.
So you had no choice. You
No,
just were sent out.
I'd never volunteered for it. I'd rather been on the ground servicing the planes, putting the armament and the ammunition on the planes rather than flying.
Yeah.
But they took us, took the whole class and sent them out to armament or gunnery school without any questions.
What Air Corps did you end up in?
I was in the 8th Air Force, in the 306th Bomb Group, in the 423rd Bomb Squadron.
What was the name of your plane?
What was it? Queenie.
Queenie?
Yeah.
Now you were in a B-17 bomber.
Yeah. I was a ball turret.
Oh, you were?
Oh,
I didn't realize that. I thought you were one of the side gunners.
No.
I didn't realize. Why don't you describe a little bit about that? Talk about the plane, because we just mentioned about the Iraqi war and how the technology there is so advanced, and what you were flying in and what you had was, very primitive in comparison.
They were just a conventional propeller type aircraft, 4-engine propeller driven aircraft. I think their cruising speed was probably 150 miles an hour.
Not too fast.
It's not fast compared with what they are nowadays.
Yeah, especially when people are shooting at you, I imagine.
But those old B-17s, they could really take a beating and get back to their base.
Now, why don't you describe what the ball turret was like?
Well, the ball turret was, half of it was in the plane and half out, And the armament on those planes was 50 caliber machine guns. And on the top turret and the bottom turret, it was twin 50s. On the side, it was just single 50s. And the tail was a 50, and the nose turret was a 50. But it seems as though they quit using the nose turret. But it was 50 caliber twin guns that I used on the ball turret.
So you would get in, let's see, how many were on the crew? There was 9 or 10 in a B-17?
Well, originally there was 10, but then they took one off. And so we ended up with 9 on the flight crew.
So you would have 2 people, the pilot, the co-pilot, and they were officers.
Yeah.
And then you would have the 2 side gunners.
Well, the bombardier was an officer, and the navigator was an officer.
Okay, so you had 4 people, 4 officers.
Mm-hmm.
And
then there was a flight engineer, and he manned the upper turret, twin 50s. And then the radio operator, after they took one man off, the radio operator also operated one of the side guns. And then there was another side gunner, and then there was a tail gunner, and then there's a ball turret gunner, which is me.
Yeah, you didn't volunteer to be a ball turret.
Oh no,
ball turret.
But see, I'm not very big, and I could get in that ball, whereas a lot of people, it'd be difficult for them to get down that thing.
To me, I'd never realized that you were in there, because I've seen documentaries, I've seen pictures, and then even with the recent, dramatic narrative of Memphis Belle, that just seems the most terrifying place to be in a B-17.
Well, yeah, but if you got a direct hit, why, it wouldn't have made any difference.
Yeah.
Where you were. And if the electrical equipment quit working, you could always operate it manually, so you could get out.
Now, with there's nothing between you and, thousands of feet of space, except for some plexiglass.
I had a real good view of what was down below.
So you got to see the European countryside.
Well, what you could see of it when you're 35,000 feet high.
Yeah.
And some missions weren't that high, but that's a long ways up.
Yeah.
You don't see too much down on the ground.
I'm sure it was very cold up that high.
Well, yeah, but we had the heating suits, heating boots, our flight jackets, that. But we had electrical heating boots for our feet, so we were comfortable enough. Most uncomfortable thing if you needed to relieve yourself, go to the bathroom, which I trained myself not to have to do.
You can go to the 10-hour missions. Now, where were you stationed in Europe?
We were just outside of the town of Bedford, a little community called Thurley. I don't know how you spell it, but that's where it was. That's where our bomb group was stationed.
And you were there throughout the entire war? What was the closest major town that was near?
Well, the one, Bedford was the closest one to us.
Okay.
And it was in the, what do they call those? Province. They call them provinces. Bedfordshire. I don't know what they call them.
Okay. And you were there throughout the entire war?
Yeah, I was stationed there.
Did they fly you out there, or did you take a boat? How did you...
Took a boat.
Took a boat, and they have your planes already on... Were your planes already waiting for you?
Well, they had people that flew the planes across. They had ferry pilots. In fact, I don't know if an uncle of mine, he used to do some of that. Whether he went over to Europe, I'm not sure. But
Is that Floyd?
Yeah, he used to ferry planes.
Hmm.
But we went on a boat.
Okay.
And I came home on the boat.
Bet you didn't want to see a plane for a while, huh?
No, I didn't care if I had never stepped foot in another airplane as long as I lived.
Have you done flying since that time at
Oh
all?
yeah, I've been on commercial flights, that's all.
That's about as close as you'll get to anything like
No,
that. Well, tell me about your experiences in Europe, as part of being in a bomber squadron, and maybe relate some stories of some of your missions.
Well, one thing about the American military, I think it's true in all branches, they train their servicemen and servicewomen well. And so that prepares them to take care of themselves. Because if they do that, there's less casualty, if you know how to protect yourself and not take any unnecessary risks. So I think the U.S. government really trains their servicemen and women real well. And I think that was true with this last war over in the Persian Gulf. I think that maybe that's one reason why there wasn't as many casualties as there could have been if they hadn't. But we used to have to go and learn the different types of enemy aircraft. We'd have classes on that so we could distinguish them from our own. You didn't want to shoot down one of your own planes, fighter planes that was escorting you.
Yeah.
And we used to have our bombing practices here in the States, and the bombers, they'd have a bomber pull a target and then we'd have to shoot at that target. I don't think we knocked down any planes that were towing those targets. And out of Las Vegas, we went out there to gunnery school, and one thing they had us do, and I thought it was a waste of taxpayers' money and our time, they put us in the back of a pickup truck and we'd ride around this large field, a circle out there. They'd have these clay pigeons that they'd shoot out of their little sheds, like trap shooting and that.
Yeah.
And we'd shoot at those things from a moving pickup truck.
Huh.
You can imagine how many we were hitting.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody ever hit any. I thought that was a waste of taxpayers' money.
So you'd be firing at clay pigeons with a 50 caliber machine gun, or what would they?
No, we were using a shotgun.
Oh, okay. So
Just
it was
a
just,
shotgun.
it was
we
just-
wouldn't hit anything with a 50 caliber. You couldn't hit anything. It was difficult to hit anything with a shotgun.
Yeah.
That's not the easiest thing to do when you're standing on the ground shooting those things. You have to have a lot of practice and be a good shot to even hit those clay pigeons.
And that was supposed to simulate flight and having the small targets going by.
Get us oriented in leading a target,
I see.
so much. And we used to do a little night flying. But when we got over in combat, the British, they didn't think this daytime strategic bombing would be very practical. They said you'd lose too many. And in the early days of the war, the American forces, the Air Force, lost a lot of bombers. They would get shot up. Well, and they didn't have too many bombers to send out on a mission. Maybe they'd only be able to send out 25 or so on a mission right at first. And most of them would get shot up before they'd get back. And the British, they wouldn't do any daytime bombing. They did the night bombing, and they left the daytime bombing up to the United States. But in the early days of the war, those on the bomber crew, I think, only had to do 10 missions because they get shot up so much, and it's so dangerous. And after a while, where there wasn't quite as much opposition, I think they went to 15, then to 25, and by the time I got over there, the Germans had taken a pretty good pounding, and they didn't have the fighter opposition. We had to do 35 missions. And after I left, I think they even went to 50, but I think the war ended probably before anybody had to do 50.
What was your first mission like?
Well,
I noticed it got scrapped. How did that feel?
Well, it could have been because it was scheduled and then the weather turned bad or something. That's about the only time that I can remember of a mission being aborted because of the weather. And sometimes when we come back from a mission, we couldn't land at our field because it would be sucked in with fog. We'd have to land another field. I saw one or two terrible accidents one time when we came in and landed our field, and then it got even worse. One plane run into another plane, so you had those kind of accidents once in a while.
Did you ever encounter enemy planes when you were in the air that you had to fire at?
Yeah, we had very little fighter resistance, and I think our tail gunner was the only one that got a shot at an enemy fighter. Most of what we had to worry about was the anti-aircraft fire from the ground. The fighters, the time we got over there, well, I wouldn't say they were non-existent, but the Germans didn't have too many left. And we had so many bomb groups and so many planes up in the air, they couldn't strike everybody.
So you would see them, but you would never shoot at them necessarily?
We could see some, but I never had to fire at an enemy aircraft. I was glad of that.
Yeah. So you basically sat there in the ball and just
in case.
Just in case, and sat there and watched the flak explode around you. So that was your biggest enemy, was the flak.
Yeah, it was.
Why don't you go ahead and hold up that piece of flak and tell me about that?
That's a piece that when we got shot up a little bit, this piece came up through the radio room and went through my GI boots. So I claimed that piece for my souvenir. But that's what it looked like, that flak that you can imagine.
I'm going to do a close-up on it and get...
One shell exploding could put out thousands of pieces of this stuff, I guess. And we did, every now and again...
I'm not getting very good focus. I'm going to...
We could see...
There we go. Go ahead and turn that around a little bit.
That looks like that's probably 3/4 of an inch thick, that piece there, and it must be about 2 inches long.
Yeah.
This stuff hitting in an engine or in a vital spot can do a lot of damage. Sometimes just going through a wing or the tail of the plane or something, you could still fly your plane. But when we got shot up, we lost an engine and had another engine going out. And we had to land on the French and Belgium border. But at that time, it was in Allied hands, so we didn't have anything to worry about.
Uh-huh. Were you considered missing in action for a while?
Oh, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had radio contact, you know, with your lead plane and the other planes, and we wouldn't have been considered in action, or missing in action. And we were only, I don't think we were there maybe more than 3 or 4 hours until they sent a plane over to pick us up.
Mm.
And then they repaired our plane enough where they could get it back to our base and get it repaired. And I flew all my missions in that, all but one, I think it was. My last mission, I flew with a different crew. But other than that, we flew all our missions in the same plane, the one that we got shot up in.
Hmm. So, would you typically take flak every time? I mean, you would get flak into the plane every mission?
No,
or?
we wouldn't. No, not every plane would, but different groups would maybe get hit at different times.
Mm-hmm.
And in our briefings, they always advise the pilots to fly a tight formation, because the Germans, especially the fighters, would go after those squadrons and those groups where they were flying kind of loose, you know, spread out quite a bit, so they could pick them off easier. And firepower from a concentrated area wouldn't be so great, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you flew a tight formation, you'd have more 50 caliber machine guns concentrated, and you could maybe down a fighter plane a lot easier than you could if your group was spread out quite a ways, or your squadron spread out quite a ways. There was 12 planes in the squadron, and there was 4 squadrons to a group, which would have been 48 planes to a group, as I remember it.
Uh-huh. Did your squadron ever lose planes?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we lose planes. Yeah, some of the guys in our squadron and in our group, we lost quite a few. There was a fellow that I didn't know him until I got over there in the service, when I was over in the service, and he was from this Ogden area. He was a co-pilot on the bomber crew, and they got shot up, and he got hit on the side of the face. And I saw him in Ogden. He worked out at Sears Roebuck, at Sears there, and he still got quite a scar on the side of his face where he got hit with some flak.
Did anyone in your crew ever get wounded or hurt?
No, we didn't have anyone on our crew that got hurt. I remember our pilot saying that day that we got shot up and got down safe, he says, there was somebody flying with us today.
Yeah. Which mission was that? Do you remember where you were going?
I really don't remember which mission that was. I should have made a special note of that.
Uh-huh. But you were on your way home from the mission?
Yeah, we were on our way back.
And you just encountered flak over a city. Is that how a
Well, we got hit over the bombing target, but we on our return home, we just wasn't going to make it.
Were you pretty nervous about that?
Oh no. The pilot says he had it under control, and being the territory down below was in Allied hands, so we didn't worry about it. Some guys returning home, once in a while they'd have to ditch in the English Channel. They just couldn't make it back.
But you guys didn't make it even as far as the channel, so
No,
it
we
wasn't-
didn't make it as far as the channel, but I'm glad.
Yeah. That's a rough time to decide that you can't make it.
I'm not a very good swimmer.
Well, the first time you were actually over a bombing target, I imagine it was your second mission. How did you feel? Were you nervous, or were you just so well trained that you weren't thinking about it so much?
It just wasn't much you could do. You just had to go in there and do your job and drop your bombs and watch for enemy fighters, and then get out and get on the way home. There wasn't much you could do. We just hoped and prayed, though, that Yeah, anti-aircraft didn't hit you.
Yeah. Let's see. One of the questions I said is, what did you do after you were shot down? But apparently, you were in the French-Belgium
We were on the
border.
border there. We were in, I don't remember the name of the little town there, but we just wandered around and looked at town over. We couldn't leave because they were going to come and pick us up. But I remember walking in this one building, and it was kind of a recreational building for the Germans, I guess. And they had kind of a mantle over a fireplace there, and right up above there was this swastika. It was still up there on the wall. I remember that very vividly. But we just had to stay right there close, and I recall those farmers over there, they were hauling sugar beets.
I imagine they were glad to have you around.
Oh yeah. And I remember, I guess it was sugar beets. Anyway, they had one horse and one oxen pulling this big cart, had great big wheels. And I thought, boy, there's that country. They were in existence so much longer than the United States, but look at the method they were using in doing their farm work. Way behind us.
Well, let's see. So even after you were shot down, they repaired your plane, took it back to England. What was, kind of backtracking here a little bit. So when you were there in that town on the Belgium-French border, was that your only time in mainland Europe that you were actually, stepped foot on there?
That was the only time we ever put foot on the continent.
Yeah. Huh. Well, I guess that was a good opportunity anyway.
Yeah. I've often felt that I'd like to go back over sometime, but I'll never make it. But I used to think when we were flying those missions over there, and you could see towards the end of the war, the U.S. and the Allies, they had so many planes. Oh, there was hundreds and hundreds up in that sky. As far as you could look, you could see airplanes. And think of them dropping bombs. And I used to look down on those cities and I thought, oh, you poor people. You innocent people down there. Taking a beating like they were.
What kind of targets did you bomb?
Oh, we bombed ball bearing plants and aircraft manufacturing plants.
It's interesting. Just this morning I was doing a little research on some bombers and things, and I saw a photograph of a B-17 that had just bombed a ball bearing plant in Germany.
Used to bomb refining plants, anything that had anything to do with their war materials.
When you went to Wilhelmshaven, was that, did you bomb naval targets there?
I don't remember the cities and what the targets were in those cities.
Well, why don't you go ahead and read some of the names of the cities? I thought that was kind of interesting. There's some in Germany and some, I believe, in occupied France, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if I can spell them correctly or pronounce them correctly, but in France there was Cayenne area and Chaumont, Rouen, Belgium. There was Chevres, Holland. There was Leeuwarden, and I guess all the other cities were in Germany. And some of the more prominent German names, of course, were Stuttgart, Frankfurt. You've heard of that. Magdeburg, Cologne, Schweinfurt. Now I remember that was a ball bearing plant for turning out war material. Schweinfurt, I do remember that one. some of these other names they don't. Hanover. These other German names not too popular as far as
They were just smaller.
the history, or geology of the country goes.
Yeah.
I've never heard of a lot of these places.
Were they, some of those smaller towns, were they just, were they in the industrial area of Germany, the Ruhr?
Well, I think, I'm sure they were.
And they would just be isolated industrial towns,
That
that sort
could
of
have
thing?
been manufacturing parts for tanks and airplanes, and putting out ammunition.
So, how would, before you would start a mission, what would happen? You would wake up. I mean, you said it was daytime bombing.
Yeah, we'd get up. Probably. It would seem like the middle of the night. Maybe 4 o'clock in the morning. Then we'd go and have breakfast. Then we'd have a briefing on the target for the day. What the mission was, and maybe how long it would take, and how many planes would be involved. And then we'd just go out to our plane.
They'd take you out there in a Jeep or something, and
Yeah, not in a Jeep. It'd be a big, big truck. I don't know what they call those trucks. You've seen them hauling soldiers around.
yeah.
It could haul maybe 20 people in the back.
And you'd be wearing those heated. Were the heated suits? Were they made out of leather or rubber or?
The suits, the flight suits were, they were like your hat there.
Okay, it's like a synthetic. Go ahead.
Yeah, and
Okay.
they were wool inside. See, but for our feet, we had the heated boots, and we had our oxygen mask, of course, with us too.
Yeah, if you're up 35,000 feet, I imagine
we
you need that.
We didn't have pressurized planes like you fly in commercial aircraft.
Would you have radio control to the different?
Oh yeah, we each had a. I can't think of the name right now. Anyways, where we could talk to one another.
So it was almost like an intercom system.
Yeah, intercom.
With, okay. Let's see. So your target was 35 missions, and then you were able to go home. Is that what it was?
Yeah. After you did your 35, you could go home. Or if you got wounded, you would have to do your 35. I can't help but think of one fellow that was in our bomb group. They got shot down, and in fact, they had to. Well, they couldn't make it back. They had to ditch in the English Channel. They picked him up and brought him back. And this one fellow, he was a gunner. He says, he wanted to finish out his missions. And so they let him, but then he got shot down again and was missing in action. He didn't know when let well enough alone, I guess.
Yeah. Did they ever find him?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of.
So how was it to finish that last mission? Were you nervous, or
No, I'm
that
just
last
happy
one?
to get it over with.
was that about your happiest day in the military?
Yeah, but I was a little bit apprehensive because my crew, once in a while, they might take your pilot and co-pilot and fly them on a different crew or something, if they were short, or a different plane, and the crew on that plane would fly. And so we all didn't finish up right exactly at the same time. And my pilot, co-pilot. They finished up before I did. I had one more mission to do, and I had to fly with another pilot, another officer crew, and I was a little bit nervous about that, you know.
Mm-hmm. The only time that you were away from your original group
Yeah.
was your last one.
Yeah,
But it went okay.
that was all right.
Let's see. So, look at the dates here. You flew. We did.
Most of them in 1944.
So your first one was August 5th, 1944, and that one didn't take place because of the weather. And then looks like you did pretty much at least one a week, sometimes more, clear through January 8th. Let's see, no, January 17th, 1945 was your last. So you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months of duty there. That's interesting.
And quite often we'd fly consecutive days, but not always. Usually you maybe would have a day, maybe sometimes 2 days, maybe even a week before, because that time of the year the weather could get pretty bad over there. So
Mm-hmm.
it could depend on it.
So where were you when the war ended? I guess it ended about another 4 or 5 months later.
When I came back, they sent me down to Texas, to Laredo for,
I've been there.
have you?
Mm-hmm.
For instructor's class for munitions.
Oh boy, that's a hellish place.
Oh, yeah,
Out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I'll say.
Just a little off subject, but the missionaries out there have to drive a pickup truck because the roads are so bad they can't ride a bike or a normal missionary car.
That's where I was. They sent me there through a little training school,
Mm-hmm.
be instructor on.
So you just spent the last of the war out there.
Mhm.
I guess your brother James was killed just the month you came home, or the month within 4 weeks or so.
Let's see. Well, I didn't get out until September, I think, of 1945. But I was home from Europe, I think, when he was killed.
Mm-hmm.
He was killed in February the 20th, I think,
Mm-hmm.
1945. And I left Europe, I think, about February 8th, 10th, somewhere through there.
Mm-hmm. How about your
Let's
brother?
see, when was my last mission?
It was January 17th.
January 17th.
Yeah.
I might have left over there a little earlier than that. Anyway, I know I was back here when he was killed.
What about Wayne? Where was Wayne when all this was going on?
Wayne was stationed up here at Brigham City, up at Bushnell General Hospital for quite a while. I don't know where else he spent his time when he was in the service.
Did they ever send him overseas anywhere?
No, I never had to go overseas.
Okay. Was there anything else from your experience that you care to share that we haven't covered?
Oh. No, I don't think so. You heard of Glenn Miller, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Band leader?
Yeah.
I was over there when he turned up missing.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. Yeah, he was on a flight from England over to the continent. I think most people figure the plane went down probably in the English Channel. The weather wasn't too good.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had I think I saw a movie here on TV not too long ago, Glenn Miller's story, and I think it showed that. But I was over there when that happened.
Uh-huh. Were you in the group that he was flying with, or?
No. I think he was on a military plane, though, that he was on when See, he was in the service,
Mm-hmm.
actually.
Part of the USO?
Well, he was a musician, and he had something to do with the Army or the Air Force musical groups and that, entertaining the servicemen.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Well, I know one thing over there, though. When we were over there, our quarters were in a tent,
Oh, yeah?
and over there in England in the wintertime, in those tents, it wasn't too comfortable. we rigged up a little drum, and could get used oil,
Uh-huh.
and so that's what we used to heat our quarters, our tent with.
I was an extra in a movie here about 6 weeks ago up in the mountains, and part of what I did in the filming is I came out of one of these tents, probably the same type that you were in. And I tell you, I mean, it was so cold in there. That was enough for me. One day of military for that film was enough to convince me that wasn't anything I would want to do voluntarily.
On the days that you weren't flying, if you wanted to take a shower, you had to get up about the same time you would on a flight if you wanted hot water.
Uh-huh.
Because if you waited and slept in and got up and went down and take a shower, the water would be cold.
Well, what would you do on those days off?
Oh, we'd just go to the recreational area or just read the magazine or book or something.
So there's a lot of sitting around and waiting.
Yeah.
How'd you feel when the war ended?
Great. Didn't come too quick. I could hardly wait to get out. I think the only person on our crew that made the military a career was a co-pilot, and he stayed in.
Mm-hmm.
I've kept in touch with all my crew members, all the members on the crew, and we exchanged Christmas cards all the time. There was just this co-pilot was the only one that made it a career. And the ironic thing about it is our flight engineer got killed in an automobile accident after he'd been home about a month.
Oh, really?
Back in Chicago.
Huh.
After going through combat like that and then coming home and getting killed in an automobile accident.
That is ironic.
Ironic.
Yeah.
Something like this, it's been on the news. This person back, was it Chicago?
Detroit. Chicago or Detroit? One
Somewhere
of those two.
back in there. His wife and brother-in-law had him murdered him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the week he got home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you released from service fairly soon after the war ended?
Well, let's see, the war ended when about
In Europe, it ended in May.
June, May.
And then in
May.
Asia in August.
Yeah. Well, I was out in September, so it didn't take long.
You ever do any training in Hondo, Texas, or Del Rio? Those are small towns from where I lived in Texas that had a lot of Air Force trainings going on. They're just out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, well, it was a good experience to have behind me, and I often thought if I'd known that I had to go fly on that bomber crew, I might have stayed with my pilot training. But anyway, then I think, well, it turned out all right, so I guess the best I didn't.
Made it back in one piece.
Yeah, I don't know what had happened if I'd stayed with my pilot training. Yeah, I had 32 hours of solo flight, but yeah, I wanted to be sure that I got home. So I was looking for something safer.
And then they put you in the ball turret.
Yeah. But it turned out all right.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you very much, Marvin.
Well, you're sure welcome.
Appreciate that. Let me just shut this off here.